This is Product Management 101. I also have working with offshore development teams and what I call Garrett's Modified Agile, which is my development methodology, which is like a mix of Agile and Waterfall. I kind of try to take the best of both worlds. So anyone interested in any of those, feel free to see me afterwards. I'm happy to share those pitches with you if you want to get additional information on top of what I'm going to show you today. So a little bit about myself. I already mentioned I started my career in the 90s as a developer, been in product management for over 16 years. GE, Oppenheimer Fund, Citigroup, bunch of startups, one of which was Market Share, which got sold for $550 million to Newstar, very nice exit. And essentially, my last role, I was essentially leading about 50 people for PricewaterhouseCoopers, everything from product managers to designers to developers to QA. And half of the team was in Shanghai, half of the team was in the US. That was actually 2 roles ago. My last role was financial services, but essentially now I'm focused on PlateRate, which is a food tech startup. Our goal is to help people find better tasting food. So if anyone wants to hear about that, I'll have go out for a drink with people after this. I have until like 9 o'clock, so we can grab a drink somewhere and I can tell you about it. And then I have twin daughters that are 11 months old that are super, super adorable. So that's the last piece of data about me. So first of all, as users, who are your users? You have current customers and existing markets. You have prospective customers, which are markets that you want to disrupt. I personally think that a product manager should be balancing between both, because you should be not only catering to your current customers, you need to think about what's the next disruptive thing that you can do to create competitive advantage for your company. What are the new spaces that you should be moving into? So that begs the question, how do you create competitive advantage, right? And so for me, it's all about solving problems. And how do you solve problems? First of all, you have to know what your customers' problems are, and to do that, you have to talk with them. Never accept a product manager role where you can't talk to a customer. I'll give the example. My very first role coming into GE, I was literally not allowed to talk to customers. I was told, you are not allowed to talk to customers. That is like a deal breaker. I ended up making friends with one of the customers, telling him, please don't tell my boss that I'm talking to you, but I feel like I can't build a product for you without talking to you. And luckily we had a good relationship. We ended up building a pretty cool product for him, but not a good idea. That was a mistake in my manager's judgment, and that happens sometimes. But also I like to talk with my customers about what's working well, what are their pain points, and what are their goals? What are their aspirations? Like, what are they trying to accomplish? And then once you know what their goals are, particularly ask them about the goals that are hard to accomplish, then think about how can you help them achieve their goals, especially the ones that are hard to accomplish. How can you help them fix their pain points? And then how do you avoid disrupting anything that's working well? So those are kind of, go ahead.
Sorry, quick question.
No, I like questions along the way, by the way. Thank you for asking. And just so everyone knows, questions along the way are great.
In that situation that you mentioned where you weren't allowed to talk to the customers, who was the customer talking to?
The customer was like people who are structured finance team members that actually structure deals.
Yeah, so who were they talking to? Like, how do you...
But they weren't talking to anyone. They had no input into the product whatsoever. I was literally asked to like rebuild the old product.
And what was your direction? Like, where were you getting direction from?
She gave me an access database. My boss gave me an access database and said, rebuild this in the web.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't want to give GE a bad name because actually they taught me a lot of really valuable stuff. That particular experience was a little bit negative, but in my career there, I learned a lot of really valuable things. She just wasn't a good manager. So most people don't like to say that about their manager, but I'm brutally honest. She just wasn't a good manager. She actually tried to give me a bad review, and what I ended up doing, she gave me a bad preliminary review. What I ended up doing is taking a survey of all the people I worked with and got peer feedback and senior feedback and feedback from everybody, and it all came back really positive, and I shared that with her, and then I ended up getting a really good final review. So, there's always ways to make things work.
Strong lessons,
Yeah.
One, and then the second one is always talk to your customer.
Always talk to your customer. You can't, don't accept a product job where you can't talk to your customers. It's just you're setting yourself up for failure. And I will never accept a product job where I can't talk to the customer.
Is that common?
It's not common.
Yeah.
No, most product people are encouraged to talk to customers, and they should be. And that's the right way to do it. But sometimes you get a manager, and she had her own political reasons, and don't get me wrong, she actually had good reasons for saying that. It wasn't the right direction, but she had good reasons for doing it. So she wasn't just crazy. Like, there was political baggage, and politics usually makes bad decisions happen, and that was what happened, is politics made a bad decision happen. So it's more complicated and nuanced than I'm explaining, or that I have time for, and I don't want to go into the details. But so coordinating with other functions, that's the other thing that's really important as a product manager. You are the glue that holds the company together in a lot of respects. Like, you're a very central figure in the company and a leadership role. So even though you don't usually have a lot of direct reports as a product manager, you're a central thought leader, you're a central organizer and coordinator between functions. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is how to coordinate with the different functions. So why do you want to coordinate with those functions? One, you want to create competitive advantage. Two, you want internal support for your roadmap, which includes management. Three, you basically want to leverage all of the customer knowledge that the organization has. That's especially sales and customer solutions, because quite frankly, they're talking with customers more often than you are most of the time. And you want to learn the lessons from them. And then you also want software that's fun to use. And then ultimately, you have to execute against the plan. You can have the greatest plans in the world, but if you can't get the engineers to deliver against them, and I know one startup that's having this problem right now, you can't deliver anything without the help of the engineers. So you do need their support. So management. I come from G Capital, like I said, very finance-driven and data-driven organization. So I very much value cost benefits and estimates. And what that means is quantify things. And what that means is look at your total market size, say what percentage of this market that can I go after. This is in typically all startup decks, is your total market opportunity. And then you pare it down to what you think you can carve out of that market. That's basically a tops-down estimate. Then I recommend countering your tops-down estimate with a bottoms-up estimate of, like, how many salespeople do I have? How many contracts can they sell? How much are those contracts worth? Break it down into financial numbers from tops down and bottoms up. When the two meet, you probably have a relatively accurate number, and you can use that to communicate to management what you think is the total market opportunity for a new product. Cost estimates, you want to think about hardware, software, design, dev, and QA effort. You want to think of an all-in cost for what it's going to cost you to deliver something. And then from that, you can get an ROI. And that's really what management cares about, is the ROI. If I'm going to give you, $300,000, what are you going to give me in 2 years? And usually estimating more than 2 or 3 years is not super productive, because estimates are usually quite wrong. And so 2 to 3 years out is about the most that you want to estimate. You can do like 5-year strategic estimates, but they have to be like plus or minus 50 to 70%, because it's just very hard to estimate out 5 years.
So,
go ahead.
Would you carve out an MVP out of that, or is this the waterfall portion of your approach, or?
So I'm not going to go in, well, I am going to go a little bit into my methodology, but it's going to come a little bit later, if you don't mind if I hold that one. And if I haven't answered it by the end, ask me in the AMA. Okay. So sales team, listen to them carefully. They work with customers daily. You want to learn about your competitors from your sales team, because your sales team's going to be talking to customers that go, oh yeah, your competitor does this and this and this. You want to know all those things, and you want to know what problems those competitors are solving, and then you want to figure out how to solve them better. Not to copy the competitor, because, okay, that's cool, but that's not nearly as cool as doing a better job than the competitor. So one up them, do better than them. It's challenging, but it'll make you think harder, and you probably all like to think if you're product managers. So that's a good thing. Meet regularly with sales. I generally met at least every 2 weeks, if not every 1 week, with sales and customer solutions, to have an ongoing dialogue where I'm presenting stuff to them. They're telling, in the beginning, I just listen. I get feedback from them until I'm established in my role. And then I give them, solutions based on the feedback that they've been giving me. I like to be really transparent about my roadmap. That's part of my style, and not everybody does this. I think it's the right way to do it. You're going to have to judge for yourself whether you agree with me or not. I'm going to make a bunch of bold statements tonight, and if they resonate with you, that's great. And if not, follow your own path. But I think that being transparent about what's coming up is really helpful, because then people don't get surprised by what you're going to deliver. And part of my agile method, my modified agile, is in keeping with that, which I'll go into in a little bit. So their feedback, the sales team's feedback, will help you earn new business. customer solutions and support, their feedback is going to help keep current customers happy. These are the guys talking to your current customers. These are the ones that know what the pain points are. What are the big flaws in your product? Listen to them as well, because they know all of the really big flaws in your product. And you want to fix those problems because those are like leaks in the boat. And they're going to make you bleed customers, and it's much easier to keep an existing customer than it is to gain a new customer. So you need to keep your existing customers happy first, and then go after acquisition. Because if you can't keep your existing customers happy first, you're going to end up losing the customers, and once you've lost them, it's a lot harder to get them back. I also think it's great to test ideas with customer solutions. I would mock stuff up and then share them with customer solutions and say, what do you think of this? And their feedback is going to resonate either really positive, or they're going to have questions, or they're going to have suggestions on how to improve it. But they're a very good litmus test for what your customers are going to say. And if they're indecisive, then you can always go to the customers themselves. But usually customer solutions or sales has a pretty good idea of what's going to resonate with customers and prospects. Customer experience and designers. I try to give low fidelity mockups to my designers because I think pictorially. And so you just have to decide for yourself, do you think more visually, or do you think more audio, or do you think more in words like typing? I personally need to make my own mockups in order to like think through something. And so I will always create mockups. I use Balsamiq. You can use whatever mockup tool you want. I've demoed I've like trialed about 20 mockup tools, and Balsamiq was my favorite one. So I'm pretty stuck with Balsamiq. I like them a lot. I don't get commission for that. But I actually genuinely like them after exploring a lot of choices. I do think you need to give user experience the freedom to change the UX, but not when it's going to destroy the competitive advantage. I've had UX people say, well, your screen is too busy. I can't have 6 fields here. And I'm like, all right, but we need those 6 fields. And they're like, can I put 4 of those fields under a drawer? And then I'm like, yeah, you can put 4 of those fields under a drawer. I'll tell you which ones to put under a drawer, no problem. UX people always want the screen to be simple and clean. But if you ruin your competitive advantage by oversimplifying and the user can no longer accomplish what they need to accomplish on that screen, you shot yourself in the foot. So you can't just listen to the UX people because they're going to oversimplify. They're not thinking about the capabilities. You as a product person have to think about the capabilities. Analytics, some teams have analytics. I've worked in ad tech, marketing tech. There's always a separate analytics team there. Teaching them about the customer and the ultimate goal is really helpful. Give them the creativity to think of creative solutions. If you're good with algorithms, like one of my strengths is algorithms, so I collaborated with them on the algorithms. But if you're not good with algorithms, just let them do it. That's fine. If you like to collaborate on algorithms, it's fun. I did say I was a geek earlier. Very much guilty as charged. So I also think you want to meet regularly with them. They're customer facing. They know the customer's analytics needs. They usually talk with the PhDs of your customer, right? So these are the guys that know the detailed analytical requirements of your customer. And at the end of the day, the analytics people give feedback to, the decision makers and say, this is good enough or it's not. Is it, in the case of ad tech, marketing tech, is it statistically significant? And if the answer is that it's not statistically significant, you haven't done your job yet because it's not meaningful then. So analytics is important. Developers and architects, really important, in my opinion, to teach them about the business problems. So I'll go into this when I talk about my agile methodology. You want your developers to understand and get get in the shoes of the customer. The other thing is I like to give developers a good view into the future roadmap. So 1 to 2 sprints ahead, I give them in detail. 1 to 2 years, I give them a high level idea. Now, when developers are making individual technical decisions, they're making decisions that will make different things harder or easier in the future. One of the lectures I give is what makes a great developer great. And one of the things that I think makes a great developer great is when they're implementing something and making a technical assumption, they tell us as product managers what's going to be easier and harder to do because of their assumptions. Most developers do not do that. Only the great developers do it. But you as a product manager can say, hey, when you're making this product, implementing this solution, what's going to be easy and hard to do after you implement it? And if you ask that question, you're helping take an average developer and creating a much better relationship between you and them. And if they say that X is going to be hard and you know that X is going to be required in the next year or two, you can say, hey, look, we can't compromise on that. We're going to need to do that in the next year or two. And usually that will help help them architect a much more flexible solution in the direction of making your life easier and helping you implement more functionality quicker. So I also recommend people learn about the technology. Some people don't want to do this, and that's okay, but my personal experience as someone with a technical background, I like to learn about the technology that my developers are using. I think it helps improve communication. I want to teach them about the business, but I also want to learn about their technical implementations. And I call it building a bridge from two directions. If you build a bridge from two directions, you're going to build it much faster and much more efficiently than if you're just building from one side. Partners. So I'm all about win-win relationships, trying to build my own company all on win-win relationships. If the relationship is not win-win, it's going to sour. And in some rare cases, you can take advantage of other people and be in such a position of power that they still have to rely on you, but that's very rare. So in general, I try to position partnerships as a win-win relationship. I mentioned partnerships because as a product manager, I've been involved in a lot of partnerships. Not all product managers are, so you won't necessarily be. Some of my roles I wasn't, but some of my roles I was. I also don't recommend depending too much on any given partner, or otherwise you become vulnerable to them and they could take advantage of you. So it's good to have multiple redundancies in your partnerships, not to the point where it's extreme, but always have a backup plan. I always have a plan and a backup plan.
Can you give an example about a partner?
Yeah, so when I was at Nielsen, we had a partner that gave us, I have to be very, very vague because of NDAs. We had a partner that gave us some proprietary data that gave us a competitive product that was a relatively unique value offering. Now, if that proprietary partner had decided to just jack up their prices and we didn't have a backup plan, we would have been in big trouble. So we were in conversations with one of their competitors who could have given us competitive information. We had a warm lead there. And if this person had ever said, hey, we're going to double our prices on you, we would have just gone to the backup guy.
Then you just kept the other guy just on a burner this whole time? Like, were you leading the law and saying, yo?
No. You have to be honest, and you have to say, look, we have a good partner here now. And, I never will recommend lying to anyone. Like, be honest, but say, look, we have a good partner here now, but we want to know what all of our options are. And if you have really, if they came in at half the price, I would have switched to them. Right. And so I just want to know, what's your value offering? Like, you just start the conversations, have a conversation and say, we just want to know what our options are. We want to know what the competitive space looks like. And you don't lead them on and you don't tell them you're going to do anything you're not, because that will backfire on you. Because if you say, oh, we'll sign with you then if that happens and you don't sign with them, they're going to be upset. So you never make commitments that you can't hold and never say that your intentions are anything other than what they are. But it's perfectly fair to say, I just want to have an exploratory relationship. Want to get to know you. Sales guys always like to talk. Right? So they'll have a chat with you, they'll talk with you, you can keep a warm relationship that doesn't culminate into anything for, years sometimes. Sales guys in slow burn channels will maintain relationships for years. So there's nothing wrong with that. So be positive and aim for the stars. I personally think it's super important to just always be positive. You have to recognize things that are bad and acknowledge them, don't ignore them. But, shoot for the stars. If you land on the moon, you're in really good shape. I do think that having a 3 to 5 year roadmap is helpful. You don't get that right away in a role, but I think after you're 6 months in a role, having an idea of what you want to do in a 3 to 5 year time range is good. Having a clear, realistic vision in a 1 to 2 year time range, and then incremental steps that are small in 2 to 3 week sprint type timings is really important. And then, my first goal when I get into a product role is to get a 6-month backlog of really clear, detailed specs for things that I want to build in the next 6 months. And I'll go more into that in my agile in here. The user story lifecycle. So this is essentially the lifecycle that I use, what I call modified agile, Garrett's modified agile. First, I define the problem. So what's the business problem you're solving? Ironically, a lot of people don't spend a lot of time defining the problem, and that's super important, because if you're solving the wrong problem, you're wasting all your time. So defining the problem is really, really important. Can't value that more. It might be just one sentence, but clearly articulating that sentence and really nailing what the customer's problem is super important. Second is solution. That could be process solution. It's not necessarily technical solution. It's process solution. It's essentially business solution. It's like, how am I going to accomplish solving that problem? And then third is design. And I call that kind of the three-legged stool, is problem solution design. Once you have problem solution design, you can, share that with people, with client development, with sales, and say, look, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Here's the solution that I have to it. Here's the designs that show you a visual of what this is going to look like. Vet that with people. Share it. You can share it with prospective customers. You can share it with, anyone that has a client-facing interaction, and get their feedback.